What are you asking me?
I'm asking you to marry me.
What? Are you trying to use me?
Yes.
What are you asking me? She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were red, but she held my stare. I'm asking you to marry me. What? Are you trying to use me? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She went still. Yes, she said softly. Would you marry a stranger to save their inheritance, even if they admit they're just using you? Drop your comment, like, subscribe, and watch till the end, because what happened next will leave you speechless. The night Emily Walker showed up at my door, I had a half-cold plate of beans on the table, mud on my jeans, and no idea my life was about to get tied to hers by morning. It was close to midnight. Rain was coming down hard enough to rattle the kitchen windows, and the wind kept pushing against the old farmhouse like it wanted inside. I had just come in from checking a calf that had been acting off all evening. My boots were still by the back door, leaving a dirty puddle on the floor I had not bothered to wipe yet. Then somebody started pounding on the front door. Not knocking, pounding. I froze with my fork in my hand. Nobody came out to my place that late, unless something had gone wrong. Around here, late-night visitors usually meant a loose cow, a truck in a ditch, or bad news. When I opened the door, Emily Walker was standing on my porch. For a second, I almost did not recognize her. Her hair was soaked flat against her cheeks. Her jacket was dripping rainwater onto the boards, and both hands were wrapped around a brown folder like only thing keeping her upright. "Jake," she said, and her voice cracked on my name. I looked past her into the dark. "You drive here?" She shook her head. I walked from the road. Grant took my keys. That woke me up faster than coffee ever could. "Come inside." She stepped over the threshold, and I shut the door against the rain. She stood there in my front room, shaking so hard the papers in her folder made a dry little rattling sound. I grabbed a towel from the laundry chair and handed it to her. "What happened?" She pressed the towel to her hair, but she did not sit down. Emily had always been like that when I saw her around her father's place, moving between two worlds. College girl clothes one weekend, work boots the next, pretty, polite, a little unsure where to put herself. I knew her, but not close. Her father, David Walker, had been the one I knew. He had helped my dad patch fence when I was a kid. Later, after my parents were gone, he was the neighbor who checked in without making a big show of it. Now David was gone too, and his daughter looked like the ground had opened under her feet. "It's the will," she said. I nodded toward the kitchen. "Sit down first. I can't." "Emily." That did it. She looked at me like she had forgotten where she was, then walked into the kitchen and sat at the table. I put the kettle on because I did not know what else to do with my hands. She opened the folder and spread papers across the table. They were damp. At the edges. Legal pages, signatures, a copy of something stamped by a county office. I did not pretend to understand all of it. I knew cattle records, loan notices, feed invoices. Lawyer words always seemed written to make honest people feel stupid. My dad added a condition. Emily said, "I didn't know. Nobody told me until today." "What kind of condition?" She swallowed and looked down. "If I'm not married by the deadline, I don't get full control of the farm. Grant does." I stared at her. The kettle started whining behind me, low at first, then louder. "Married?" I said. She nodded, embarrassed and angry at the same time. Dad thought it would protect me. I guess he thought if I had someone steady beside me, Grant couldn't push me around. I don't know. Maybe he wrote it when he was sick. Maybe he was scared. The lawyer said it's valid. I turned the burner off. "When's the deadline?" "Friday." It was Monday night. I poured hot water into 2 mugs, though neither of us had asked for tea. "And Grant?" "He came back this morning." She gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "New. Truck, clean shoes, talking like Dad's farm was already cleared out. He has buyers coming this week, Jake. A development company. He said the land is worth more without cattle on it." That put a hard feeling in my chest. I had seen men like that before. Men who looked at a pasture and saw house lots, looked at a barn and saw scrap lumber. They always said the same things. Be practical. Take the money. Move on. Like land was only land, and not years of work buried into every post and ditch. Emily pushed one paper toward me. Dad wrote, "Your name, in a note. Not in the will, but with it. He said if anything happened, you were the one neighbor who would understand." I did not touch the paper. "What are you asking me?" She looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes were red, but she held my stare. "I'm asking you to marry me." The kitchen went so quiet I could hear rain dripping from her jacket onto the chair. I leaned back. "Emily, I know how it sounds." "I don't think you do." "I do," she said quickly. "I know it's strange. I know it's unfair, but I don't have anyone else. Grant is already telling people I'm too emotional to run the farm. The workers don't know who to listen to. The lawyer keeps saying the deadline like I can change it by worrying harder." I rubbed both hands over my face. I was tired. Too tired for something that big. Too tired for a woman at my table asking me to put my name beside hers on a marriage license like we were signing for a used trailer. "Are you trying to use me?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she came in, she went still. "Yes," she said softly, "but not like that. I'm asking for help. I won't lie to you and say it's anything else." That answer hit me harder than a polished one would have. I looked around my kitchen. Same walls my mother had painted yellow. Same table where my father used to spread bills and pretend they were not as bad as they were. Since they passed, I had kept the farm going because stopping felt worse than working myself half into the ground. I knew what it meant to be left with land before you felt ready. I knew what it meant to have people waiting for you to fail. Emily's hands tightened around the mug I had put in front of her. "I don't want to lose this farm." I believed that. I could hear it plain. Still, I shook my head. "Marriage means something, Emily. I know. No, I mean it. It's not just a box to check." "I know," she said again, and this time her voice was smaller. "But losing the farm means something too." That was the problem. She was right. I stood and walked to the back door. Through the glass, I could see nothing but rain and the weak reflection of my own kitchen. My place in Walkerland shared a fence line that had been there longer than either of us. Her father had run good cattle, paid late sometimes, same as everybody, but he kept things decent. If Grant sold it, that fence line would turn into survey flags and machines. I turned back. If I say yes, there's one rule. Emily sat up straight. "No lies between us," I said. "Not in this house, not at this table. To the outside, we do what has to be done. But between you and me, we stay clean. You don't pretend this is love. And I don't pretend I'm some kind of hero. We both know what it is." She nodded fast, then slower, like she wanted me to know she understood. "Okay, and if this gets ugly, you don't hide things from me." "I won't." I looked at her wet hair, the folder, the scared way she tried not to look scared. "All right," I said. "We'll go to the courthouse in the morning." Her face changed, but not into relief exactly. More like the weight shifted, and she almost fell under the new shape of it. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded once, because I did not trust myself to say much. The next morning we drove into town in my old pickup with the heater blowing too hot, and neither one of us talking. Emily wore a blue dress under a brown coat, like she had tried to make the day look normal and failed. I wore my cleanest shirt, which still had one stubborn grease mark near the cuff. At the courthouse, the clerk looked from Emily to me, and then back again, curious but polite. We signed where she told us to sign. A judge, with tired eyes, said the words. Emily's hand was cold when I held it. Mine probably felt rough and awkward. There were no flowers, no family, no music, just rainwater drying on my truck outside, and two people standing under fluorescent lights, making a promise neither of them had expected to make. When it was done, Emily looked at the paper like it might disappear. I looked at her and said, "Now we keep your farm standing." She nodded, but her eyes were on me, not the paper. And that was the first moment I understood this was not going to stay simple. Emily moved into my farmhouse that afternoon with 2 bags, 1 raincoat, and a cardboard box full of papers she did not trust Grant to leave alone. I gave her the spare room at the end of the hall. It had my mother's old quilt folded on the bed and a dresser that stuck if you pulled the top drawer too hard. Emily stood in the doorway with her bag still in her hands, looking like she was waiting for me to say something normal. I had nothing normal. "Bathrooms across the hall," I said. "Closet door squeaks. I'll oil it later." She nodded. "Thank you. You don't have to thank me every time I point at furniture." That almost made her smile, but not quite. The first few days felt like we were both walking around a skittish horse. We drank coffee at the same table, but neither of us knew where to look. She kept asking if she could use things in the kitchen, like the mugs, or the stove, or the salt. I kept telling her she lived there now, then feeling strange every time I said it. At night, she went to the spare room and shut the door softly. I went to mine and lay awake longer than usual listening to the old house make its small noises.
Pipes ticking, wind in the eaves. Once, I heard her step into the hallway, pause near the kitchen, then go back again. I did not ask. Bye-bye, the whole county knew. That was how small towns worked. At the feed store, Marlene behind the counter looked at Emily's ring, then at me. She did not say anything rude. She just raised one eyebrow. "Well," she said, "that happened quick." Emily went red. I set a bag of mineral blocks on the counter. "Need 2 more of those." Marlene looked at me like that was not the answer she wanted, but she rang them up anyway. "Congratulations, I suppose." "Thank you," Emily said quietly. Outside, while I loaded the truck, Emily stood beside the passenger door with her arms folded. "Everybody thinks I'm ridiculous." "No," I said, "everybody's curious." "Different thing. It feels the same." "It isn't." She looked across the parking lot toward a couple of men who had stopped talking when we walked out. "Do you regret it yet?" I threw the last bag into the bed of the truck. "It's been 2 days." "That's not an answer." "No," I said, "I don't regret it." She nodded, but she did not look fully convinced. Grant came by the Walker farm the next morning. I saw his truck before I saw him. He was standing near the main barn in a dark coat and clean boots, talking to 2 of the hired men like he owned their ears already. Emily stiffened beside me. "Keep walking," I said. She did, but I could see her fingers tightening around the clipboard she carried. Grant turned. When we came up, he had the kind of smile men use when they want everyone else to know they are not worried. "Well," he said, "here they are, the happy couple." Emily lifted her chin. "Why are you here?" "This is still my father's property. It's my responsibility now." Grant laughed once. "You got married overnight to a neighbor with more debt than sense, and now you think you're ready to run a cattle operation." The 2 workers looked down. That bothered me more than Grant's words. They were good me. But they were waiting to see who had power. Emily opened her mouth and stopped. Grant saw it and stepped closer. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. So, take the money. Go build a life somewhere that doesn't smell like wet hay." I moved half a step forward before I thought about it. Emily noticed. So did Grant. He smiled at me. "And you, nice move, Harper. Marry the younger sister and suddenly you're standing on Walker land like you belong here." My hands curled once then relaxed. I had learned a long time ago that anger did not fix a gate, pay a bill, or win an argument in front of witnesses. "I'm standing beside my wife," I said. "That's all." Emily glanced at me when I said it. Wife. The word landed between us heavier than it had in the courthouse. Grant rolled his eyes. "Sure." Then he turned to the workers. "Nobody makes major changes until this mess is settled." Emily found her voice. "That's not your call." "Isn't it?" "No," she said a little shaky. "It isn't." Grant looked amused, but I saw one of the workers, Ray, look at her differently. Not convinced yet, but listening. After Grant left, Emily walked into the barn and gripped the edge of a stall door. I froze. You answered. Barely. She let out a breath and looked over at me. You could have shut him down. I could have. Why didn't you? Because then they'd all learn to look at me instead of you. She did not like that answer at first. I saw it in her face, but she did not argue. That afternoon, it took her through the feed accounts. She sat beside me in the small office off the milking room, chewing the end of a pen while I explained which supplier gave David more time when cash got tight and which one smiled while adding fees. This one, I said, tapping an invoice, you call before the due date. Don't wait for them to call you. Makes you look in control that I'm not in control. Looking like it is half the job until you are. She wrote that down, which made me laugh. What? I didn't mean literally that I'm not wasting good advice. For the first time all week, the air between us loosened. The real test came 2 days later with a broken stretch of fence along the west pasture. 3 posts had leaned after the rain and 1 wire was slack enough for trouble. I brought Emily because she needed to see how small problems turned into expensive ones when people ignored them. Ray was already there with tools. When Emily told him she wanted the corner brace replaced, he looked straight past her at me. You want it done today? He asked me that I did not answer. He waited. Emily looked at me, too. Panic flashing across her face. I bent down and picked mud off my boot with a stick. Finally, Emily cleared her throat. Ray, I said replace the brace today. If we patch it, we'll be back here next week after the next rain. Ray shifted his weight. It'll cost more that I know, she said. Do it right. There was a long second where nobody moved. Then Ray nodded. Yes, ma'am. Emily's face went bright with embarrassment, but she held still until he walked away. Then she turned on me. You could have helped. I did. You stared at your boot. Exactly. She looked mad for about 3 seconds. Then the corner of her mouth moved. That was awful. Yep. I hated every second. Yep. But he listened. He did. Later, when we got back to my house, she made dinner without asking where anything was. Eggs, toast, leftover potatoes fried in a skillet. Nothing fancy, but she put a plate in front of me like she had done it 100 times. You didn't eat lunch, she said. I was busy. You always say that. Usually true. She sat across from me, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back, a smudge of dirt near her jaw she had missed. She looked tired in a different way than she had the first night. Less lost, more used up from actually fighting. After dinner, I found her at the kitchen table with bills spread out in neat piles. She had labeled them with sticky notes. Urgent, call, ask Jake. The last pile made me shake my head. You don't have to ask me everything. I know, she said, not looking up. But I don't know what I don't know yet. I leaned against the counter. That's fair. She glanced toward the hall. This is strange, isn't it? What part? She gave me a look. I nodded, all of it. I keep thinking I'll wake up back at Dad's house, and Grant won't be there, and I won't have a husband sleeping down the hall. Technically, you have a husband trying to sleep down the hall. Big difference. That got a real smile out of her. I looked away first and rinsed my plate because something in my chest had shifted, and I was not ready to name it. We still had separate rooms. We still had rules. On paper, the marriage had a purpose and a deadline, but by the end of that week, Emily knew how I took my coffee, and I knew she tapped her pen twice against the table when she was scared to make a call. That did not feel like paperwork. It felt like the start of something I had not planned for at all. Grant waited almost a week before he made his next move, which told me he had been thinking about it. That worried me more than him shouting. I was fixing a cracked water line behind my barn when Emily came across the yard fast, holding her phone in one hand and her hat in the other. She did not even slow down when she reached the gate. "He's at the farm," she said. I shut off the valve. "Grant with 2 men I don't know." Ray called me. He said they're walking the south pasture. That I wiped my hands on a rag. "Buyers, that's what it sounds like." Her face was tight, but underneath that I saw the same fear from the night she came to my door. Not as strong, not as wild, but still there. I grabbed my keys. "Let's go." She climbed into the truck before I did. All the way over, she stared through the windshield, breathing like she was trying to keep herself from saying too much. When we pulled into the Walker yard, Grant was standing near the cattle pens with 2 men in clean jackets. One had shiny shoes. That was the first thing I noticed. Shiny shoes in a yard still soft from last night's rain. Grant turned and smiled when he saw us. "Emily," he called. "Good. Saves me a phone call." She got out of the truck and slammed the door harder than she meant to. "What are you doing?" "Showing interested parties the property. It's not for sale." One of the men shifted, uncomfortable. The other looked at Grant like he wanted him to handle it. Grant walked toward us slowly. "It will be. Once the estate stops entertaining this little courthouse performance." Emily's fingers curled around the edge of her coat. I stepped beside her, but I did not move ahead of her. Everybody looked at me anyway. Grant, the buyer's right by the barn. Even Emily, for half a second. I kept my voice low. "It's your land. Say it." Her eyes stayed on mine, wide and scared. Then she turned back. "This farm is not for sale," she said. Grant laughed like she had told a joke at dinner. "You hear that? She's been married 5 minutes and already thinks she's an owner." "I am the owner," Emily said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "And you don't get to bring strangers through my pastures without asking me." Grant's smile thinned. "Your confidence is fake. Your marriage is fake. And when Jake gets tired of playing hero, you'll be standing here alone with bills you can't pay and men you can't manage." The words landed where he wanted them to. I saw Emily take the hit. Her shoulders dropped just a little. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell Grant exactly what I thought of him, standing there in clean boots talking about land he had not worked in years. But Emily raised her chin before I could. "Then I guess you'd better leave before you waste any more of their time." The yard went quiet. One buyer cleared his throat. "Grant, maybe we should." Grant threw him a look, then turned back to Emily. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," she said, "but I'll regret selling it more." That was the first time I saw Ray smile at her. Grant left angry, tires throwing mud near the cattle guard. The buyers followed him, slower and less sure. Emily stood still until their trucks disappeared down the road. Then she walked straight into the barn. I found her in the tack room, one hand pressed against the wall. "I thought I was going to be sick," she said, "but you weren't. That's your comfort." "It's the truth." She let out a weak laugh and covered her face with both hands. "He's right about some of it." "No, he isn't. I don't know how to run all this, Jake. You don't know how to run all of it today." She lowered her hands. I leaned against the door frame. "That's different. Tomorrow, you learn another piece. Then another. That's how everybody does it. You make it sound simple. It isn't simple. It's just possible." She looked at me for a long second and something in her face softened. Not relief, exactly. That night, she stayed up late at my kitchen table with a stack of repair estimates. I came in from checking the north pasture and found a plate covered with foil waiting near the stove. "Yo. You made dinner?" I asked. "Barely. Don't get impressed that I lifted the foil." "Too late," she rolled her eyes, but I saw the smile she tried to hide. "Things changed after. That, not loudly. She stopped asking me before every phone call. She started calling suppliers herself. She messed up once and agreed to a delivery date that did not work, then called back and fixed it without telling me until later. She got sunburned across the nose. She tore or sleeve of her jacket on a nail and kept working. One windy evening, the kind where everything rattled and no sound seemed to come from the right direction. A latch on the lower road pasture had been damaged. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe someone had been careless. I did not know, and I did not say what I suspected because suspicion did not get cattle out of the road. Ray called first. Emily and I were loading feed buckets at my place when her phone rang. She answered, listened, and went pale. Cattle are out by Miller Road. I was already moving. By the time we got there, half a dozen head had pushed through the opening and scattered along the ditch. One was too close to the road, and a delivery van had stopped with its hazard blinking. Rain had started again, cold and mean. Emily jumped out before I told her what to do. Stay wide. I called. Don't run straight at them. I know. She snapped, then slipped in the mud and caught herself on one hand. She got up covered to the wrist, angry enough to keep going. For the next 2 hours, we worked with Ray and 2 neighbors to push the cattle back through the gate. Emily was everywhere at once, muddy, soaked, hair stuck to her neck, yelling when she had to and listening when she needed to. Once a steer turned hard toward her, and my heart kicked against my ribs, but she held her ground just long enough for me to swing around and move them back. When the last animal was inside and the temporary chain was set, Emily bent over with both hands on her knees. You all right? I asked. No. She said, breathing hard. But they're in. Ray came over, rain dripping off hat. You did good, Emily. She straightened like those 4 words weighed more than any speech Grant had ever made. On the drive home, she was quiet. Mud covered her jeans. Her hands were scratched. She looked exhausted but not defeated. Back at the farmhouse, I put clean towels by the bathroom and made coffee even though it was too late for it. She came into the kitchen wearing one of my old sweatshirts because her clothes were ruined, sleeves falling over her hands. I look ridiculous, she said. You look like you worked. She sat at the table. Do you still see me like that first night? I looked at her. The scared woman with the wet folder was still part of her, sure, but now there was more. The woman who stood up to Grant. The woman who got back up in the mud. The woman who stayed when quitting would have been easier. No, I said, I don't. Her eyes held mine. The old house was quiet around us.no rain p. Pounding now, just dripping from the roof. She stood first. I did, too, and neither of us said anything smart or careful. When she stepped closer, I did not move away. What happened between us that night did not feel like part of the arrangement. It did not feel like a story we were putting on for Grant or the town or some lawyer reading papers in an office. It was quiet, honest, and ours. In the morning, she was still there beside me, her hand resting against my chest like it belonged there. For the first time since I had signed that paper, I was afraid of what would happen when the farm was safe. Because by then, I knew it was not just the farm I wanted to keep. The final meeting happened on a Thursday morning, and Grant arrived like a man who had already practiced his winning face in the mirror. I saw him through the office window before he came inside. Dark coat, pressed pants, polished shoes again. He parked beside my truck and looked at it. With the same expression he used for bad weather, old barns, and people who worked with their hands. Emily stood beside me in the hall holding a folder twice as thick as the one she had carried to my house that first night. You ready? I asked. No, she said. I looked at her. She took a breath and straightened her shoulders. But I'm walking in anyway. That was enough. The estate lawyer's office sat above the bank with narrow stairs and old carpet that smelled like dust. Grant was already seated when we came in, one ankle resting on his knee like he owned the chair, the office, and every acre being discussed. He glanced at Emily's folder, then at me. "Brought your farmhand guard?" Emily sat down before I could answer. "I brought my husband." Grant smiled. "That word is doing a lot of work lately." The lawyer, Mr. Callahan, cleared his throat. He was an older man with wire glasses and a careful way of moving papers around. He had known David Walker for years, which made him harder for Grant to push around than most people. "We're here to review compliance with the condition in Mr. Walker's estate documents," he said. "And to address Mr. Walker's concerns about operational control." Grant leaned forward. "Good. Then let's address the obvious. This marriage is a stunt." She panicked, grabbed the nearest broke neighbor, and now we're all pretending this is normal. Emily's hand tightened around the folder. I wanted to reach for it under the table, but I did not. "Not yet." Grant kept going. "She is 24. She has no serious management experience, she does not understand the financial burden, the maintenance, the liability, or the long-term value of the property. Selling is the responsible choice." Mr. Callahan looked at Emily. "Would you like to respond?" The room went still. A month earlier, she might have looked at me first. She did not this time. She opened her folder. "Yes," she said. "I would." She laid out paid invoices first. Feed, v. ET, fuel, 2 equipment repairs, 3 fencing orders, then supplier agreements she had renegotiated herself. Worker schedules with names, hours, and duties. A repair plan for the south barn roof. A note from Ray and the other men confirming they accepted her as the person in charge of daily decisions. Grant laughed under his breath. "You got the hired hands to sign a paper." "Congratulations." Emily did not look at him. "I also brought statements from Marlene at the feed store, Mr. Ortiz from the repair shop, and 2 neighboring farms confirming ongoing operations and support." I saw Mr. Callahan's eyebrows lift slightly. Emily kept her voice steady. "I'm not saying I know everything. I am saying the farm is operating. Bills are being handled, repairs are scheduled. The cattle are accounted for. The workers know who makes decisions and the property is not for sale." Grant's face changed, just a little. The confidence stayed, but it tightened around the edges. "You rehearsed that well," he said. Emily finally turned to him. "Don't interrupt me again." The words were not loud. That made them better. Grant blinked once. I looked down at the table because I nearly smiled and it was not the time. Mr. Callahan reviewed the papers slowly. Grant grew more irritated with every page. He shifted in his chair, checked his watch, then stopped pretending to be patient. "This is insane," he said. "Dad never meant for her to trap the land in some fantasy. He knew she needed guidance. That's why he wrote the condition. No, Emily said. He knew you'd sell the second you could." Grant pointed at me. "And what about him? You think he's here out of kindness? Jake Harper has been one bad season away from losing his own place for years. You expect me to believe he married you out of loyalty?" I felt Emily look at me then. So did the lawyer. I sat forward. "I don't need Emily's farm. I've already got one I can barely keep standing." Grant smirked. "That's my point." "No," I said. Your is that everything has a price. Mine doesn't." The room went quiet. I looked at Mr. Callahan, then at Emily. "I married her because David Walker was right about one thing. She needed someone beside her while she learned how to stand here without everybody pushing her over." Emily's eyes softened, but I kept going because Grant needed to hear the rest. "But she's standing now. You can dress it up however you want, Grant. Responsible choice, land value, future planning. You don't want the farm because it's a burden to you. She wants it because it was home before it was worth money. Grant's jaw worked, but no words came out right away. Mr. Callahan stacked the papers neatly and removed his glasses. The marriage license satisfies the stated condition, he said. And based on the provided records, Mrs. Harper has demonstrated active operational control. The estate will proceed with Emily Harper retaining control of the Walker farm. For a second, nobody moved. Emily closed her eyes. Just once. Then she opened them and nodded like she was accepting work, not a price. Grant stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. You'll regret this. Both of you. Emily looked up at him. Maybe, but it'll be my regret. He stared at her, waiting for her to shrink. She did not. Then he grabbed his coat and walked out. Through the window, I watched him cross the lot, his clean shoes stepping around puddles like the ground itself offended him. He got in his truck and left without looking back. Emily did not chase him. She did not cry. She just sat there with her hands flat on the folder, breathing slowly. Outside, the air felt different. Cold, but open. We walked down the stairs and out beside the trucks. The town was moving around us like nothing had happened. A delivery man carried boxes into the pharmacy. Emily stood by my passenger door and looked at the ring on her hand. The farm's safe, she said. Looks that way, she nodded, still looking down. So, you don't have to do this anymore. I knew what she meant, but I waited. She lifted her eyes to mine. You helped me more than I had any right to ask, but the promise was made under pressure. If you want out, I won't hold you to it. For a moment, all I heard was traffic on the wet street and the low hum of the bank sign above us. A month ago, I would have known what to say. I would have said we made a deal and the deal was done. I would have gone back to my house, my quiet kitchen, my cold dinners, my fences, my bills, my life exactly as it had been. But, I thought about Emily at my table with sticky notes all over the bills. Emily in my old sweatshirt after the cattle got loose. Emily telling Grant not to interrupt her. Emily learning the weight of the land and choosing to carry it anyway. I didn't stay because of the paper, I said. Her mouth parted slightly. And I'm not leaving because the paper did its job. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it, but was afraid to grab too fast. So, I made it plain. I thought I was helping you save your home, I said. I didn't realize I was finding mine. Her eyes filled, but she smiled at the same time. Then, she reached for my hand. We drove back without saying much. We did not need to. When we reached the fence line between my place and hers, the evening sun had broken through the clouds, laying gold across the wet pasture. The two farms sat side by side, worn and imperfect and still standing. Emily stepped up beside me, not behind me. Her hand stayed in mine. And for the first time in years, when I looked across that land, I did not feel alone.